A lot of times we have seen people where just through a relentless pursuit of business that oftentimes they have sacrificed some aspect of their well-being, whether it's their own physical well-being, whether it's their mental well-being, their emotional well-being. And there's also effects from maybe their relationships. Their family has often suffered as well. And a lot of times it didn't have to be that way. These things can actually coexist. If you think about, you've seen startups. I've seen startups at times where they give everything for that decade or so, or however long it takes to get that payday that they really wanted to sell the company or whatever. And now they have neglected their health for nearly a decade, and it's now a lot of that time now is having to try to buy back their health from the time that they neglected it. And I look at this like there's a lot of different angles you can look at it. You can look at this as in the world of wealth management, or you can look at this world as simply credit cards, where a lot of times if you pay the credit card balance every month, there's not going to be any interest at it, and that's it. But over time, if you continually skip paying the credit card or don't fully pay it off, there's interest that's going to accumulate. And it's the same thing with our health, that the more we neglect it, the longer we neglect it, the more we have to pay for it down the line, and the more there's secondary effects that can come in the way in terms of our ability to lead, our ability to not just lead in business, our ability to lead in a community, our ability to lead with our families. All those three pillars right there are affected then when we don't necessarily make our well-being a focal point. When I think about
Strategic Edge, our subtitle, Applying Transformative Leadership. We are glad you could join us today. We are a podcast for leaders and by leaders. We're going to interview the best and the brightest of leaders to be able to provide you information. We're here to inform, to instruct, and to inspire you on your leadership journey. My name is Ted Davis. My company is Grace Strategic Services, Inc. We're proud to be the sponsor of this podcast. And we encourage you to take the information that we're going to share, make it your own, absorb it, then reflect on it. What does it mean to you? And finally commit to an action plan. So with that, let's get started with today's episode. Welcome, and I am so thrilled to welcome today's podcast, Julian Hayes. Julian is the founder of Executive Health, which is a boutique executive wellness consultancy. He focuses on forward-thinking and mission-driven CEOs, entrepreneurs, and other business leaders to achieve world-class health, and you assist them in the organization in creating a culture of sustained, optimal performance. Absolutely great stuff. I also love reading your bio sketch here that you contribute to Forbes CEO Network. That's quite an achievement. I applaud that. I applaud the contribution of intellectual property, being a thought leader in this industry. So congratulations there. And you write weekly about the intersection of wellness, business, and leadership, which I want to explore the link there. And you've offered over 300 articles. Congratulations. That's awesome. And you've published in Entrepreneur Magazine, Success, and others. So welcome to today's podcast. What else should people know about you?
Thank you so much. Probably I'm just an oversized kid still, so I'm very much a little kid in terms of just my sense of wonder and curiosity.
That's wonderful. Have you ever completed the VIA Character Strengths Assessment?
I have not. I did complete the Clifton Strengths Finder. I did that one, but I haven't did that one that you mentioned.
Well, the reason why I ask is because one of the 24 character strengths in this instrument, the VIA Character Strengths Assessment, one of the character strengths is love of learning. That was one of my top. In fact, it was the top one. When I saw that, I was so excited about it. I'm now a loyal fan of the instrument just because it captured one of my absolute passions. And obviously, you have the same passion as this love of learning, having that kind of curiosity. So I absolutely applaud you doing that. So tell me a little bit about, or listeners, a little bit about this idea that you're writing about, you're thinking about, you're in the consultancy. the idea of forward-thinking, mission-driven CEOs, who are obviously business-focused, but you're saying, hey, you've got to also think about health and fitness as a part of that. Tell me how you see that overlap.
A lot of times we have seen people where just through a relentless pursuit of business that oftentimes they have sacrificed some aspect of their well-being, whether it's their own physical well-being, whether it's their mental well-being, their emotional well-being. And there's also effects from maybe their relationships, their family has often suffered as well. And a lot of times it didn't have to be that way. These things can actually coexist. If you think about, I've seen startups at times where they give everything for that decade or so, or however long it takes to get that payday that they really wanted to sell the company or whatever. And now they have neglected their health for nearly a decade, and it's now a lot of that time now is having to try to buy back their health from the time that they neglected it. And I look at this like there's a lot of different angles you can look at it. You can look at this as in the world of wealth management, or you can look at this world as simply credit cards, where a lot of times if you pay a credit card balance every month, there's not going to be any interest added, and that's it. But over time, if you continually skip paying the credit card or don't fully pay it off, there's interest that's going to accumulate. And it's the same thing with our health, that the more we neglect it, the longer we neglect it, the more we have to pay for it down the line, and the more there's secondary effects that can come in the way in terms of our ability to lead, our ability to not just lead in business, our ability to lead in a community, our ability to lead with our families. All those three pillars right there are affected then when we don't necessarily make our well-being a focal point.
Have you found any evidence, or what's your experience say about how effective a leader is day to day based on how well they're taking care of themselves?
Yeah, there's different aspects when we think about leadership, and a leader needs to be charismatic. A leader wants to be emotionally intelligent. You want a leader to think a little more logically when making certain decisions as opposed to more out of just raw emotion and everything. And you can trace this back to activity in our brain. If you get curious, you can go Google and look up brain scans, and you'll see that an individual who is chronically sleep deprived now in this business of leadership in this and being a pretty high achiever, high going individual, you're not going to just have a very perfectly balanced life. That's not for these types of people. But over the course of time, if a person who is severely chronically sleep deprived, you can see different activity in their brain. You're going to see a person who has less activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is your logic and reasoning. Then you're going to have someone with more activity in your amygdala, and that's more just your primitive emotional state. And so you could translate this back into this world here. You're going to have someone who's acting a little more out of emotion, a little snappier with their movements, a little more quick to act on something, just a little bit jumpy when you're coming at this person. And if you think about this, maybe it's someone, you don't want to make financial decisions out of emotion. You want to be fairly logical when you're doing that. When you're communicating with team members, sure, you want to have some emotion in there, but there's nuance to that as well. You still want to approach that in a more pragmatic and a logical form as well. And that also goes down to our charisma. And you think about our executive presence, and we think about there's an energy that we feel. When you think about communication, there's 7% that's verbal, and then 93% is the nonverbal. And so seeing someone who has good energy to themselves, and physical activity is going to help in the energy department, you're going to be able to feel that. And so they're already making an impression on you before they even said a word right there. And first impressions matter, whether we like that or not.
Okay, so it sounds like, have you ever studied, it sounds like you studied cognitive sciences to understand how the mind works. And it sounds like you studied the mind-body connection. Because clearly, I think our physical and the body and structure and how we manage our body is tied to our emotion. I love the study of neuro-linguistic programming, which is about the mind-body connection. So it sounds like you're a student of those sciences.
I dabbled in and a little bit of everything. And then luckily during the year of medical school that I was there before I left, got to take a lot of good classes, got to also go to the cadaver lab and everything. And then you get to really learn about the brain. And then you're just curious of how these different compartments in the brain, what they do and everything. And so it just leads me on one rabbit hole to another rabbit hole of really piecing things together.
Okay. So you are a strong believer that the relationship between mind and body, and you got to take care of the body, so it'll take care of the mind, which obviously will take care of your key decision making. Now, within that, is there any leadership philosophy, model, or so forth that's kind of your guiding star of how you lead?
When I think about leadership, first and foremost, I always think about myself first and leading myself and being a pillar of action for others to follow suit after that. But then and what I mean by that is a lot of times, and it's like talking to little kids sometimes as well, is that we will say things, but really we're paying attention to the actions. And it's those small actions that are often overlooked that really make the biggest difference. And so for me, it's vision's a really big one for me. Even when I did my Clifton Strengths Finder and a bunch of other different ones, it always came back to vision for me. So I usually tend to talk in that kind of manner, talk from a more futuristic sense, a possibility sense. So I'm very big on optimism and everything. Probably need to work on being an operator, but I have other people around to help with that part of being the operator, so I can usually stay in the clouds a lot. In general, I don't know if it's a particular name, but there's a certain set of values. Like when I was thinking about executive health, one of the things is endless reinvention, constantly reinventing yourself. And I want everyone else to have that. So I have to do it with myself. So we're constantly improving ourselves 1% every day, reinventing ourselves every day. And there's different areas of how you can do that. We think about work-life integration. So when you are working at your job, when you're working in your company, the personal aspect is still there as well. How do we get all these things to blend? Because I want well-rounded people. It's not just the one who's thriving in this very professional life, but their personal life is in shambles. So I care about all those things because eventually the personal life is in shambles enough, it's eventually going to spill over into the professional world.
Okay, so in other words, you're looking at the whole person.
Yeah, I'm a very systematic thinker. So I look at everything as in systems, just like the human body is full of systems and they're all interconnected. It's the same thing with our day-to-day life.
Absolutely. So your systems thinking, you see the connection of everything you do in life. You're one person, whether it's at work, at home, whatever. You're one person, and you're the wellness applies to both areas, so that the good health leads to good decisions. And obviously, do that. Now you've written over, you said here, 300 articles. Tell us about some of those articles and how you come up with ideas of what you're going to write.
Yes. So sometimes the idea is I'm reading, maybe watching YouTube videos, and there's different topics that come up. I recently wrote one on artificial intelligence and how that could benefit the workplace. And I got done watching the latest Mission Impossible movie again, and it's about artificial intelligence. And I was just curious of maybe I should write something on artificial intelligence. And so I thought, how could I relate this to the workplace? What are some possible areas in terms of how could artificial intelligence benefit CEOs, leaders, and decision makers of organizations, but also the people? And so it's overall a article about talent management, talent recruitment as well, but also improving the organization as a whole. And then other things is things I'm interested in. So I was a caregiver for my father for a while, and I know that a lot of times people do not have a lot of time to grieve when they lost someone and they have to go back to work. So I wrote that one because I'm familiar with that world, and I know that a lot of people go through that. I know that with the age shifting right now, the generations of baby boomers and they're aging, more and more millennials and Gen Z are having these dual lives. And so how's that going to affect them? But also for companies in the future and being forward thinking, this is something to attract some of the best people when you're looking at these factors, because people are not necessarily, it's not just about the salary anymore. It's about the quality of life. And so that's kind of the arguments and things I bring in there. So a mix of personal, and then a mix of curiosity, and then a mix of things that are kind of just brought to my attention.
Excellent. So you really are a wellness guru, not just simply a physical fitness guru. You're looking at how it all fits together.
Yeah, and that happened through personal. So I was blessed with very good athleticism. So the physical world was never really a problem to me once I applied myself. But as some people, I had to mentally develop myself, emotionally develop myself. And so I think since that was kind of what I would say one of my perceived weaknesses, it's kind of bled into my work. And it's also gave me an appreciation. The physical is only just one area of so many other things, because we've seen it in athletics, people who are physically gifted, but something's just not right. They just don't seem to come out on top ever. And a lot of times it's these other small intangible factors.
Wonderful. And so when you engage somebody, let's say somebody who's in a leadership position, but they're struggling across the board, but particularly in the health and fitness area, what do you do to help them get back on course?
Yeah, so it's a mixture of science, and then it's a mixture of more soft skills. So kind of we've been talking a lot right now about the soft skill aspect and really seeing what's going on in their life. How is this happening? What's causing this? But then the more hard scientific stuff is we have very extensive lab assessments and different genetic tests and a whole comprehensive assessments to look at every single part of the body and system of the body to really get a good picture of them. But then you don't just rely on that part. I also, once again, this is a theme here, I like to rely on the more intangible aspects, the stuff that maybe it's harder to quantify. So is there a stressful period in this person's life? Is there something coming up with work? Is there an acquisition? Is it a startup? Or is it a personal thing? Some of these things, because a lot of times it's not just purely a health and fitness issue. There's something else that's going on that's causing this issue in the health and fitness, and that's manifesting that. So it's a mixture of the sciences and the I guess you would say more the soft skill world.
Yeah, I mean, the word wholeness, as you described that, you're looking at the wholeness of the person's life and how does the business, how does the family, how does everything, because you're dealing with a whole person. I really like to emphasize that when I'm working with leaders, particularly when they're trying to hire. You think you're looking for a whole person. You may advertise for a job with skill set, experience, and so forth. But what walks in the door is a whole person. Walks in with dreams and desires and ambitions and so forth. And we as leaders got to be that bridge that connects the person with their dreams and ambitions. And how do we do that? How do we connect the business and the organization and that person to be able to achieve all that? And so I think we both approach it with a wholeness attribute, but we both bring a little bit different. And I was an athlete throughout most of my life, but I would not be the one who does the fitness and health training. That's not my wheelhouse anymore. That's excellent. Well, we've only got a couple minutes left. So one of the things that I always ask my guests is, what are 3 practical things people ought to be doing as a result of what they've heard today? So what are 3 things you think people ought to be doing today?
Yeah, this one's probably going to be a little different than what you're expecting from a health and fitness guy, because a lot of times you're probably going to hear watch what you eat, go exercise, go sleep or something. Those things are all good, but I think we have to go a little deeper. And you've heard those things before. So number 1 is I want you to think about this. Create a set of values, missions, or values, a mission, and principles. And what I mean by that is if you think for a second, you think about your career. I'm sure you had a vision for your career. I'm sure you have a mission for it. I'm sure you have principles and values for your business, for your career, whether you're an entrepreneur or intrapreneur. And I can ask the same person, what's your personal well-being philosophy? What's your mission for good health and fitness? What does optimal health look like to you? What does it feel like? What are you doing? How are you participating? And you're going to get a blank stare, or you're going to get a very surface level answer of, I just want to feel good. And saying I just want to feel good that's not very inspiring. I don't feel excited. And when you're really trying to get someone engaged, you want to tap into the logical side, but then you also want to tap into the emotional side as well. And when you have those two things, you're going to have someone who has much more engagement, much more excitement, and it's also someone who's going to be able to stay consistent when things get tough because they have an emotional reason and they have the logical reason as well. And so after that step, and I just mentioned the emotional part, and this is where we're really going to tap into that, is step 2 is to create some stakes and reasoning for why you must take care of yourself. So once again, why must you work every day? Why must you build your company? Why must you continue to rise up in corporate? The answers are easy. I want to take care of my family. I want to retire at a certain age. All these different things. Do we have the detail? Flip that same thing back to your health. Why must you take care of your health? Why must I eat well? Why must I mitigate my stress? Why must I sleep and do all these other different health behaviors? Find the reasons for that. For some people, or for leaders like myself and that are around my age, a lot of things that work is I tell them, think about, they have like a young daughter or something. As I think about this, maybe it's 20, 25 years from now, and she's getting ready to walk down the aisle. Do you want to walk down the aisle with her, or do you want some other random person to walk down here? And it's something that really helps them tap into it. And we all have different motivational factors, but that's one thing and one way of what I mean by creating some stakes and reasoning for why you must do this thing, with the same way we do with our professional life. And the last thing here is, now this is the action step. This is to create an audit and an assessment of yourself, particularly with your health. So we do this with business. We can review balance sheets, P&L statements. We can look at cash flow, all these things to see how things are flowing there. And it's the same mindset that I want you to apply with your health right now. And there's different tiers and different levels of audits and assessments that you can do. You can go to get some very comprehensive lab work to get a sense of all your biomarkers to see where you stand right now, and then work on that. You can even start to go for a physical fitness test and see where you stand there. The point being is, document where you are at this very moment right now, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you don't like it. And now you have something to build upon in the future. But then also you have something to compare and contrast, just like any good business does.
That's the baseline.
Absolutely.
It's the baseline, and then you know how to make mark progress. I'd be curious, as you mentioned all three of those and talk about the health, the emotional, the physical, and so forth. The one dimension of life that you didn't mention is spiritually. Ever encourage people to examine where they are spiritually, regardless of what their faith is, but is that also an attribute that they ought to be worried about?
No, I think, yes, I talk about that. It slipped my mind, but that is something that I mentioned as well, because sometimes, especially when it comes to someone who's feeling burnt out, or they're just not feeling like themselves, and on the surface, it seems like they have everything, and there's just something missing. And a lot of times that's where I say there's a spiritual well-being, spiritual fitness problem that can offer some exploration. Absolutely, it's a part of it. I think when you're really in flow and really in the zone and you're creating something, that's a form of spiritual wellness right there, in my opinion. I mean, I can tell you personally that when I'm really creating consistently and publishing things and contributing and feeling like I'm being of service to people, there's a form of spiritual wellness for me.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So real quickly, let me just kind of summarize that. So your 3 steps: create a set of values, mission, principles for your overall health and wellness, as well as other aspects of life. And create the stakes. I think that's answering the question why that Simon Sinek talks about. Your wording is number 2 here is create stakes and reasons why those are important. And then thirdly, develop your baseline. To identify the markers. Where are you today? Assess yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually. Assess yourself so you know what you want to do. That is just great insights. Anything else you want to share today before we wrap up?
No, I just I appreciate you having me on, and I hope listeners get something out of this. And you know, if this helps them be 1% better, then I consider this conversation a success. I'm readily available, so listeners can reach out to me if they have questions about anything.
Good. And we were going to, on our website for our podcast, Strategic Edge, we will have there the links to Julian's website, to his articles and so forth. So when you listen to this, also go to the website and download the episode material so you can get in touch with Julian. Julian, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. This has been absolutely enjoyable. I've learned a few things, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So thank you to the listeners, and thank you, Julian.
Thank you so much.
Now we've got 3 ideas of what to share from today's podcast. So again, what I'd like for you to be able to do is take those ideas, make them your own, reflect on them. What do they mean to you? And then thirdly, commit to an action plan. Commit to actions that you can take to apply what we've talked about today. If you want help, if you want some ideas, if you want some accountability, please contact me. Contact me by sending me a text, 913-306-1499. Put podcast follow-up in the text message, and I'll get back to you within 24 hours. Thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you on our next broadcast.